This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Before I start talking about anything sports related, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast so you always get those alerts on your phone, computer, whatever device you might be listening on, so you always know when we drop an episode and you never miss said episode. Also, make sure to leave us a 5-star review in the comments. We really appreciate that as well. And to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We really appreciate that, and we would love to interact with you guys on social media as well. Whatever you have social media-wise, we have as well. I hope wherever and however you may be listening, you and your family are safe, happy, and healthy during these times. And also, I hope you had a fantastic 4th of July. I sure did. And we have a fantastic show for you guys today. A lot of news going around, specifically in the NFL. In just a few moments, I'm going to be talking about a Cleveland Brown player who recently requested a trade and why that's big news. Also, a little bit later in the show, I'm going to be talking about Antonio Brown and Jadeveon Clowney, two of the biggest NFL free agents that are still on the market. Arguably, both of them are top 5 players at their respective positions, and they are still unsigned by teams. I'm also going to be talking about some rookie quarterbacks in the NFL, giving some predictions about them, and make sure you stick around to the end of the episode. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 most versatile players in the NBA. I think Bleacher Report did a list, and it got a lot of heat on social media, so I want to give my list of the top 10 most versatile players in the NBA, so make sure you stick around at the end of the episode for that. But let's start off with the Cleveland Browns, who, even though they're a small market team, are like always in the news, always like just relevant, even though they're one of the worst run organizations in sports. Yesterday, one of their tight ends, David Njoku, requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. Only 23 years old, went to the University of Miami, one of the best young tight ends in the league, if you ask me. Young as in within 3 years of the NFL. I don't think he's good, like a top 5 tight end in the league or anything like that, but he has a ton of potential. And actually, usually when tight ends come into the league, they take a couple of years to develop into becoming, the Rob Gronkowski's, Travis Kelce's, George Kittle's. David Njoku actually had a really good rookie year, but I'll get into that in a minute. But this just keeps coming and happening to Cleveland, So I've been talking about Cleveland a lot on this show, specifically Baker Mayfield, also because I think, I've said this a ton of times, Cleveland is like the Noah's Ark of football teams. 2 good receivers, 2 good tight ends, 2 backs, 2 tackles, 2 DNs. They got everything talent-wise, one of the most talented rosters in the league. But what seems to keep happening with Cleveland is they get young talent, and they either A, don't perform to the level that they were supposed to be drafted at, guys like, Johnny Manziel, or they do get young talent, and they do show promise, and they do, look like they have a bright future in the league, and they want out within 3 to 4 years of their career, such like David Njoku. Now, I think a huge part of David Njoku wanting out is that he is no longer the number 1 tight end on Cleveland, and I do believe that he has the potential to be a star tight end in this league. He's big, strong, athletic, super young, again, only 23 years old. Is he as good as Austin Hooper is right now? Absolutely not. Austin Hooper is a top 5 tight end in the league, and the Browns paid him accordingly. But it wouldn't surprise me if David Njoku kind of realized that I'm not going to be getting a ton of targets on this Browns team anymore. With Baker having to spread the ball around to Jarvis, Odell, now Austin Hooper, still running the ball with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, David Njoku is probably 5th or 6th on the totem pole when it comes to targets, receptions, key parts of this offense, and that doesn't help someone, especially when it comes to contract negotiations, which David Njoku is about 2 or 3 years away from, depending on when he wants to negotiate. Instead, David Njoku would like to go to a team that, maybe either A, is in a better position to win, or B, doesn't, have a tight end, could get a ton of targets, boost those stats, get more money in the future. And I totally get that. I totally understand where David Njoku's coming from. And I think this would actually happen with any team. If you have a really good young player and you just sign somebody at that position, especially in the tight end position when not a lot of teams run multiple tight end sets, especially multiple receiving tight end sets, David Njoku and Austin Hooper both aren't great blockers, both more athletic receiving guys. Browns are clearly all in on winning now with Baker Mayfield before they have to pay him, if they pay him. I've talked about how this could be his last episode. So they went all in with Austin Hooper and they paid him. So you know that since they're paying Odell, Jarvis, and Hooper, that they're going to get the bulk of the targets in the passing game, and Njoku's going to take a back seat, even though I really do believe David Njoku is really good. And if he goes to a good team, and a little bit later in this segment, I'll be mentioning some teams where I think he could potentially go to. There are a lot of suitors. There's going to be a ton of teams interested. Then I really do believe David Njoku could flourish into a tight end, and he might not be a big name now. I really do believe he'll be a big name in the future. Again, perfect mold for the current tight end, big, tall, fast, athletic, can move. Doesn't have great blocking skills, but again, tight ends have been moving away from blocking and more in the receiving and more playing like a bigger wide receiver, how athletic they are, things like that. And I really do believe David Njoku could blossom. But again, this just seems to keep happening for Cleveland. And I'm not saying that Cleveland shouldn't have gone after Austin Hooper. It's clear that they wanted him, they identified him, they paid him that money to make him, I think, the highest paid tight end in the league, maybe behind Kelsey. Again, deserves it. Austin Hooper is fantastic. But why does this keep happening to Cleveland? And not to mention that according to ESPN, David Njoku was wanted out of Cleveland since before the Austin Hooper signing. Maybe this is just the straw that broke the camel's back. They said that that David Njoku has wanted out of Cleveland for almost a year now, just hasn't really publicly and really actually asked for a trade until this point. Maybe he's not happy in Cleveland, not happy with the targets, not happy with the system. Or maybe it's just because Cleveland can't seem to get it right. They can't seem to get anything right when it comes to young players. They never seem to get the right guy. I mean, if you remember Johnny Manziel, I think they made a mistake taking Baker Mayfield over a guy like Sam Darnold, especially over a guy like Lamar Jackson, but who would have predicted that? And even Josh Allen looks like to be better than Baker Mayfield. And when you take all of those things into consideration, that Cleveland maybe got the third best quarterback in that draft class when they had the number 1 overall pick, that's not what you're trying to do as a franchise. You're not trying to build that. I think they've gotten better since they were that 0-16 team. Again, I like Kevin Stefanski. I like the new general manager, but it's just, there's no way of knowing that Cleveland is finally in a good position and now another young player wants out. And it just doesn't surprise me. I'm not fazed, but I think this would be a bigger deal for other teams. Like if this happened to a team like the Patriots, young Patriot players rarely want out. Young Raven players, young 49er players, Chiefs players, because of the culture, because of what they're doing, because of the system, they have faith in the coach. And David Njoku, 3 years in his career, doesn't know a ton about the NFL when it comes to a business standpoint. Doesn't have a lot of experience. He's not like a veteran on a bunch of other teams, but he knows that he wants out of Cleveland. Again, this just keeps seeming to happen with them. For the next, 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes or so, I want to go in through David Njoku and some potential trade suitors because he could be one of the biggest trade pieces on the market. He is now the second young tight end on the market, him and O.J. Howard. I think he's a lot better than O.J. Howard personally, but this might seem like a small move of, David Njoku wants out. But this could be trading for a future star tight end in a league that's progressing towards a passing league that need more tight ends. And there's going to be a ton of suitors. And the rumors are he's only worth a 4th or 5th round pick when I think he was drafted in the 1st or 2nd round. I mean, again, Cleveland is just killing their value. Also that part as well. They're not even getting good value for David Njoku. They drafted him, I think, in the 1st round, maybe even the 2nd. I think actually maybe it was the 2nd round. Oh no. I think it was actually the 1st round. Yeah, late 1st round. That was the year they also got Jadeveon Pepper. So he was drafted in the 1st round. And the early reports is David Njoku is maybe worth a 4th or 5th round pick. So you just killed the complete value. Not just because, David Njoku is worth a 5th or 4th or 5th round pick. He's definitely better and worth more than a 4th or 5th. But the Browns have no leverage because they have to let David Njoku go. He wants a trade, 1. And 2, it's not like he's their only tight end. They have Austin Hooper. So they don't even necessarily need him in other teams' NFL eyes. And that's troublesome for Cleveland when it comes to terms with a trade and leverage and things like that. So I want to go with some teams that could potentially trade for David Njoku and why this could be a big deal. I also want to mention that, like I said earlier in this segment, tight ends, when they come in the National Football League, like they need 2, 3, sometimes even 4 years to really develop and really become the tight ends they're supposed to be and they were drafted by. They got to get the right NFL body, things like that. David Njoku was kind of an exception. He had a phenomenal rookie year. 56 receptions, 640 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Like, that's really good. 11.4 yards per catch. That stuff like that is like really good, and that's really promising, and that's what you want out of a tight end, maybe his second or third year in the league, not necessarily his rookie year. Last year was his second year in the league. He obviously got hurt and missed the entire season. He only played, I think, in one game, or maybe 1 or 2 games. 5 receptions, 41 yards, and a touchdown for only playing 1 or 2 games. Was on pace to have a better year than his rookie year, if you want to look at it like that, but who really knows? So this is a big deal. I really do believe that David Njoku is a big trade piece, and he will be an underrated offseason acquisition. And there's a ton of teams interested, I'm sure, as there are. And here are some of the teams that I think should look at him, and I think one of these teams will be trading for him. It's a pretty big list, so let's just get right into it. Number 1, the Carolina Panthers. Head coach Matt Rule is bringing a college system over to the NFL. Joe Brady is the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for LSU last year with Joe Burrow. And who did Joe Burrow like to throw to almost more than anybody else? Thaddeus Moss, the tight end there. So Joe Brady wants to utilize a big, strong, athletic tight end. David Njoku fits that mold. Carolina makes a ton of sense to me. Again, they're a young team in the rebuild mode, but it wouldn't surprise me. They drafted 7 straight defensive players. I really do believe this offense is going to be good, though. I don't think Carolina is going to just lay over and die. I don't even think I have them as the worst team in their division. I have them as the third place in their division. Guys like Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel. If you added David Njoku to that piece, that's 5 good offensive weapons for a quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, who's not going to turn the ball over and is a really good point guard when it comes to the quarterback position. Can really just distribute the ball really well. And I really do believe that the Carolina offense could really use a tight end, especially after losing Greg Olsen to the Seattle Seahawks. I think it would just make a ton of sense for the Carolina Panthers to go after him and do that. Next up is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this isn't as likely as a team like I just mentioned, the Panthers, who I think are a pretty strong suitor. Arizona's always looking for more offensive weapons. Cliff Kingsbury likes to use every part of the field, go 5 wide, throw the ball around. Again, Kyler Murray's a great distributor of the football. I get it. They already got DeAndre Hopkins, ton of good offensive weapons in a pretty decent tight end as well. But again, David Njoku would just fit that Cliff Kingsbury mode, big, athletic, strong tight end. Could maybe even spread the field out even more. Can line up against corners, linebackers, safeties, whoever. I think would make a lot of sense to Arizona as well. Next up, we have the New England Patriots, and I think this is everybody's worst nightmare almost, because the Patriots will have gone from no promise and no future and looking like one of the worst teams in the league, like I predicted, to now, after they signed Cam Newton, to get another big, fast, strong, athletic tight end. And where have we seen that before? They've thrived with guys like Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. They are the mold. They are where tight ends go to shine. It wouldn't surprise me if David Njoku would like to go to the New England Patriots. That makes a lot of sense, and I would almost peg them as the favorite to land David Njoku. They have a ton of draft capital next year. There's going to get a ton of compensatory picks too for losing guys like Cal Van Noy, things like that. Tom Brady as well. And that's a big thing. That is a big move. I am kind of scared to see if David Njoku would end up being a New England Patriot, would fit the mold perfectly. Patriots make a lot of sense. Next up, I have the Miami Dolphins in division. Again, just another young team looking to surround its team. Its new young quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who we'll get to later in the episode. Just as many weapons as they can. Miami's already got a pretty decent, I think a pretty high potential young tight end, Mike Gesicki, who fits the same role as a David Njoku. But again, nothing wrong with having 2 big, strong, athletic tight ends. Not to mention that David Njoku went to the University of Miami, so there's a Miami connection there. Could definitely see Brian Flores, Chan Gailey, Miami trying to bring him home. Next up, I have the Cincinnati Bengals, who make a ton of sense here. So they lost Tyler Eifert in free agency to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Joe Burrow clearly likes to throw to a tight end like a Thaddeus Moss. I thought Cincinnati would go after him in the draft. They did not. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Cincinnati was all in, trying to move maybe even a 3rd round pick to go get a David Njoku, get Joe Burrow a weapon early on. You already know Joe Burrow is starting week 1. As many offensive weapons as you can get him, that would be superb. You would have a Joe Mixon then, an AJ Green, a T Higgins, and then Boyd, and then as well as David Njoku potentially. Again, 5 good offensive weapons to surround your young quarterback with when you don't have the greatest offensive line. As many weapons and as many guys that could potentially get open and get open quickly would be really good and awesome for Joe Burrow. Next up, I have the Washington Redskins, who make a lot of sense to me, mainly because, again, another team just surrounding its young quarterback with weapons. A lot of these teams are like that. Also, Ron Rivera is the head coach there. He used, Greg Olsen for his entire tenure in Carolina, was one of the best tight ends of all time, reception machine. Ron Rivera wants to have a tight end and a good one at that. Again, young, athletic. David Njoku going to the Redskins would make a lot of sense. Next up, Green Bay Packers. Again, get Aaron Rodgers some freaking weapons, man. The Green Bay Packers drafted his replacement, a running back, and then an inside, I think a guard in the draft this year. Get him a freaking weapon. If it's not going to be Antonio Brown, who I'll talk about in my next segment, seriously, get him a tight end like David Njoku. Jimmy Graham is gone. A big, athletic tight end, someone who would remind him of more of a prime Jimmy Graham, would be absolutely perfect for Aaron Rodgers, and I think that would really benefit David Njoku's career as well. I have 3 more teams here. We'll get to them really quickly. The Houston Texans make a lot of sense. Obviously, they got rid of DeAndre Hopkins, brought in Brandon Cooks, it seems that, Houston has gone from just surrounding Deshaun Watson with speed, and while I didn't agree with the DeAndre Hopkins trade, I do like the Brandon Cooks acquisition, and if David Johnson's career could maybe be revived, he's a great speed back as well. You could have a lot of speed around Deshaun Watson, guys like Kenny Stills, who's a fast machine, Brandon Cooks, one of the fastest receivers in the league, Johnson, who's one of the best maybe pass-catching backs in the league if he can just kind of revive his career. And then David Njoku is one of the fastest tight ends in the league. Just surrounding Deshaun Watson with speed would make a lot of sense. Next up, I have the Buffalo Bills, who make a lot of sense as well. Again, just trying to get Josh Allen some more weapons. The defense for Buffalo is going to be phenomenal. I don't trust Josh Allen personally as a quarterback, especially when it comes to accuracy, mechanics, fundamentals. But getting more weapons can't hurt. You already got Stephon Diggs there, Cole Beasley, John Brown. Now get him a tight end, David Njoku, would be absolutely great. That'd be 4 weapons in the passing game for Josh Allen. And even though I don't think he's the best or most accurate quarterback, you could certainly make the case that you might not need to be the most accurate quarterback when you have a good receiving core and a good young tight end and David Njoku. And finally, a team that I think should really make a push for David Njoku is the Indianapolis Colts. They just lost Eric Ebron. He obviously was phenomenal that one year, especially with Andrew Luck. Went to the Pittsburgh Steelers in free agency. Get another young guy for Phillip Rivers to throw to. Drafted Michael Pittman. Already have T.Y. Hilton. Get Phillip Rivers a tight end. Phillip Rivers loves his tight ends, throwing to Antonio Gates for years and years. David Njoku would make a ton of sense there as well. We are going to take a quick break. On the other side of the break, I'm going to be talking about 2 major free agents who were unsigned, Antonio Brown, Jadeveon Clowney. Why aren't they signed? Where could they potentially go? And we'll talk about that right after this break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are here back at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for continuing to listening to today's show. I just got finished talking about David Njoku and where he could be traded to and why it actually is a big deal versus maybe just a small transaction. Could be one of the more underrated transactions in the entire league. And I want to switch to 2 more transactions that I think could happen in the NFL, hopefully before training camp. That would definitely be a big transaction and nobody would question. And that's Antonio Brown and Jadeveon Clowney. Now, these are 2 guys who are each probably top 5 at their position. I think Jadeveon Clowney is definitely a top 5 defensive end in the league when you take a look at his athleticism. Not just his pass rushing ability, but also his run blocking ability, or not run blocking, run stopping ability. And I think Antonio Brown, maybe not a top 5 receiver anymore, but certainly if he could reach back to his form that he was maybe 2 years ago, 100% could be one of the top 5 receivers in the league, given his age, even though he's already 31. Now, these are two guys also who are not on teams for completely different reasons, I want to point out. So, one of the reasons why I think Antonio Brown isn't on one of the teams is maybe because of his past, how it ended with the Raiders last year and also the Patriots, some allegations. Is the league going to suspend him for anything? That's unclear, things like that. Well, Jadeveon Clowney, I think, is just not on an NFL team because of the price and how much he's asking for. So we're going to get into both of those guys and where I think they will end up going to. I think both of them will actually be on a team before training camp. I really do believe that. And let's just start with Antonio Brown, who has more of a clear path of where he's going to go than Jadeveon Clowney does. So yesterday, a video surfaced of Russell Wilson working out with Antonio Brown, doing full drills, running, throwing, things like that, with I don't know if it's necessarily with pads, but with helmets on, running deep routes, running drag routes, running flags, running posts, things like that, the deep ball. And it's clear Russell Wilson, who isn't a very public guy, isn't really one for showboating, asking for a lot, has always seemed to make more with less with the Seattle Seahawks. This video to me seemed like not a cry for help, but of a, hey, Seahawks management, come look at this. This looks great. And I'm going to be honest with you, Russell Wilson and Antonio Brown is a scary combination. Now, again, Antonio Brown with anybody would be a good receiver. I think he, when he went to, the Patriots, him and Tom Brady were going to be a scary combo. I've mentioned the Packers on here, who I think are the second most likely team to get Antonio Brown. That would be a scary combination as well. But Russell Wilson, in my opinion, is the perfect quarterback for Antonio Brown. Now, Antonio Brown likes to work with a quarterback that doesn't have a big ego, and that was one of the problems he had with Ben Roethlisberger. Antonio Brown doesn't want to have the same mentality as the quarterback, it appears. He wants a guy, who's not as, flashy and stuff like that. He wants to be the flashy one. He wants the spotlight on him. Perfect for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson just wants to win football games. Antonio Brown would certainly help him with that. And Russell Wilson's a fantastic leader, and they're also similar in age. It's not sort of like a, big brother, little brother sort of thing. It's more like twins, the age thing. I think one of the things that Antonio Brown had a problem with Ben Roethlisberger was since that Ben was older than him, more of a veteran, he would try to teach him, coach him up, do some certain things that rubbed Antonio the wrong way and didn't like his leadership style. That's been known, things like that. I think Big Ben also publicly, said some things about him in the media that Antonio didn't appreciate. Things like that. Russell Wilson's the complete opposite. He treats everybody, the same, doesn't want special treatment, very Tom Brady-like. And again, Russell Wilson throws one of the most catchable balls in the league. He's always putting it in the right spot. One of the most fun, athletic, strong-willed leaders in the league as well. Just be a perfect all-around fit between those two. And I think Russell Wilson wants help because here's the thing also. They're in the toughest division in the National Football League. The NFC West is 100% the toughest division, and it's only going to get better. The Cardinals are only going to get better. They're a super young team. If the Rams can just turn around some things, fix the offensive line, they went to a Super Bowl 2 years ago, and San Francisco obviously went to a Super Bowl last year. So let's just stick with San Francisco for a second. Seattle is trying to is trying to be on the same level as San Francisco, get to a Super Bowl. The best quarterback in the division is Russell Wilson, so Seattle has that. What is San Francisco's biggest weakness as a football team? You could argue the quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. I wouldn't necessarily that. I would say more the secondary, the corners and the corners and the safeties out of a really strong San Francisco team, don't get me wrong, and have a chance to go to the Super Bowl again next year to 100%. I think the weakest link of the team is the secondary, and that's maybe overshadowed by how good the defensive line is and maybe even their linebacking core is and how good really just the pass rush system is with Nick Bosa, things like that. And how can Seattle exploit that? By getting as many good receivers as they humanly can. They get Greg Olsen in free agency, bring him over from Carolina. DK Metcalf's only going to get better. He was one of the best wide receivers that were rookies last year. Tyler Lockett is really good, really fast. I think he's a product of Russell Wilson, if you ask me. I don't think he'd be as good if he was playing with another quarterback, perhaps. But if you add Antonio Brown in the mix and you have a wide receiving core of a bigger receiver, DK Metcalf, a pure speed guy in, Tyler Lockett, and then you have an in-between guy, a guy who can run every route in the route tree and be a true number one receiver, Antonio Brown, then you can make the argument that, right up there with the Arizona Cardinals, Seattle is the best receiving core in that division, and they could really threaten San Francisco because of how weak their secondary could potentially be, and that's a big deal. Not to mention a potential Super Bowl hangover for San Francisco. Who knows how they're going to deal with, the fact that they were leading about 3/4 way through those discussions, things like that. What's going to happen? They also lost to Forrest Buckner in the offseason. They let him go. Things like that matter, and I think Seattle knows that they have the best quarterback in the division, and he can work with a lot less. And if Antonio Brown's coming at a price that's the veteran minimum, I think it's a no-brainer. Not to mention Seattle is one of the most pro-player organizations in sports. Seattle seems to be an organization that takes second chances on guys, takes guys who run their, are trash talkers, who are more flashy. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, guys like that, Marshawn Lynch as well. Things like that. So they seem to welcome a personality that's like Antonio Brown, which is fun, energetic, trash talking, maybe, what some teams would call distracting, Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks would call entertaining. Things like that matter in the National Football League. Who runs your organization matters. What's your persona of a locker room? How your locker room operates matters. And Russell Wilson is the perfect leader for a team like that. He's not like, the same personality as Richard Sherman, Antonio Brown, Marshawn Lynch, Earl Thomas, guys like that who have been in the building. He's more calm and level-headed and, just win football games sort of thing. And not that there's anything wrong with trash talking, things like that. Again, I love it, and I wish more players would do it. But there's a good mix of both on a team, and that's what Seattle has. So again, it makes a ton of sense for Antonio Brown to be there. He'd be fantastic with Russell Wilson. I really do believe that Antonio could put up like career numbers. Seriously. Could have that good of a season. He appears to be in shape. If you look all over his Instagram, he looks great in that workout video with Russell Wilson. And again, Russell Wilson isn't stupid. He put that out there for a reason. He wants Seattle to sign Antonio Brown, and I really do believe it's going to happen. I expect Antonio Brown to definitely be on a team by training camp. If I had to pick, probably Seattle. I give him about a 90% chance it's going to be them. Another like 7 or 8% that it's the Packers, and the other 2 or 1% would probably be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think he will be a Seattle Seahawk. I think Antonio Brown wants to be a Seattle Seahawk as well. Now let's switch gears to Jadeveon Clowney, who's one of the best defensive ends in the league. He has 32 career sacks. He's pretty young still, born in 1993, so what does that make him? About 27, 28. Again, still in his prime. 9 forced fumbles, 172 total tackles in his career. Really good, really good athletic. I don't know if he's necessarily lived up to the hype as that number 1 overall pick. And I think some people are a little bit skeptical to Jadeveon Clowney, not just because of the injuries. He has an injury history, but also because of the lack of sack production. He is not this Nick Bosa. He's not a pure pass rusher like he might have been hyped out to be out of college, but that's okay in my opinion because of what he does in the run game. He does a lot. Again, 172 solo tackles, one of the best run stoppers in the league coming off the edge, sets the edge, doesn't let the running back kick it to the outside, and that matters a lot in the National Football League. There are a lot of teams that have been interested in him. His contract negotiations started off between $20 and $22 million a year. He has not gotten that so far. Rumor has it that has come down to about 18, 19, maybe even 17 as well. Now you're getting in the ballpark of a team who might be interested. Again, it's hard for me to believe that Jadeveon Clowney won't be on a team by training camp. I really do believe he will. A lot of teams need pass rushers. Almost every team can always use a pass rusher, especially if Jadeveon Clowney's level, even run defense as well. Things like that matter. Again, he's definitely going to be on a team by training camp. So here are some of the teams that I think Jadeveon Clowney could potentially sign with. Number 1, I have the Cleveland Browns, who at one point seemed like the pretty strong favorites to get him, and it seemed like that they were actually pretty close or were getting there to potentially sign Jadeveon Clowney, and then it obviously hasn't happened yet. Makes a lot of sense. Cleveland appears to be going all in, even though I like their pass rushers, Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon. If you get Myles Garrett and then Jadeveon Clowney on the other end of that, that's the best pass rushing duo in the league, in my opinion. It would be scary stuff. Myles Garrett's more of a pure pass rusher guy, so you have that on one end, and Jadeveon Clowney, who's a more run stopper, athletic, get in the right position type of guy, while also still, rushing the passer. Stuff like that is absolutely incredible. I could definitely see Cleveland going all in there, and who knows, if Cleveland could really get another defensive end and a quarterback where you have Big Ben, in a league where you have, in a division where you have Ben Roethlisberger, and a division where you have Lamar Jackson, you need speed, you need athleticism, you don't need big clunky defensive ends, you need ones that are fast, can keep up with guys like Lamar Jackson. Jadeveon Clowney is your guy. I could totally see that happening going to Cleveland, and they might be the favorites. Next up, I have the New York Jets, who appear to be making some more splash signings in the past 2 years. New GM Joe Douglas is still waiting waiting for his first big splash as the new GM of the New York Jets could be Jadeveon Clowney. They need defense. They need pass rushing. They need help. Anything to make Sam Darnold's experience as the New York Jets quarterback better would be a positive, in my opinion. Is New York willing to go that price when they're already paying guys like C.J. Mosley and C.J. Mosley and Le'Veon Bell? Those two guys get a lot of chunk of change. Also, you already know Jamal Adams is on the way out, so that defense is going to get worse. Replace him with a Jadeveon Clowney. Maybe you're just back where you started. Things like that, and your defense doesn't take a huge hit. If you could replace Jadeveon Clowney or Jamal Adams with Jadeveon Clowney, even though they play different positions, they do a lot of similar things: tackling, rushing the passer, run defense, stuff like that. Next up, I have the Indianapolis Colts, who just added DeForest Buckner in the offseason. They're trying to get a big defense going. They have the cap space to sign Jadeveon Clowney. I think they could probably pay him more than any of these teams on this list. Makes a ton of sense for Indy to go after him. Bolster the defense for Phillip Rivers. Don't make Phillip Rivers have to win you football games. Don't make Phillip Rivers have to come from behind. Things like that is where Phillip really starts to struggle, and he might not be able to replicate things he did maybe earlier in his career. So getting a Jadeveon Clowney on the Indianapolis Colts would make a ton of sense. Next up is a sneaky team that people started talking about when Clowney hit the free agent market, and that was the Tennessee Titans. They already have a fantastic defense. Adding Clowney would only make a lot of sense. Vrabel likes athletic guys. They like guys who can switch, play maybe different positions, you could call it, because Clowney can play a little bit of linebacker as well. Would make a ton of sense in the Mike Vrabel defense. Clowney to Titans makes a lot of sense. Just bolstering that defense, getting better. And, Tennessee's trying to recreate that lightning in a bottle they had last year and prove people that, again, it wasn't just lightning in a bottle, that they can be sustained success and be, constant winners. Things like that. Clowney would certainly help that cause. Next up is a team that really wanted to trade for Clowney when he was traded to Seattle, who I'll get to in a little bit. The Miami Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins almost had a trade, they had a trade in place for Clowney. Clowney did not want to play for the Dolphins at the time. He thought they were tanking, and so did pretty much everybody else in the league, that the Dolphins were tanking for Tua, if you guys remember that at the beginning of the year. Clowney did not want to go there. Instead, Clowney was going to be a part of that Tunsil trade when Tunsil was traded to Houston. Instead, that didn't end up happening. Tunsil went to Houston for a bunch of picks instead of Clowney. Clowney went to Seattle. Is Clowney now interested in playing in Miami? Potentially. Are the Dolphins still interested? They've already signed two, defensive ends, Shaq Lawson and Emmanuel Ogbah. But again, Jadeveon Clowney would make a ton of sense in a Brian Flores, New England style defense. Again, versatility, switchability, athletic, big, getting in the right spot, run defense, things like that matter to Brian Flores, to guys like Bill Belichick, coaches like that, It's clear that Flores wants to have a really good defense in place for Tua Tagovailoa. So again, similar to how the Colts should do it with Phillip Rivers, where they don't have to ask Tua to come from behind that often. Things like that matter in the NFL. Wouldn't surprise me if the Dolphins were interested. Wouldn't call it likely, but those teams have had that team and that player have had a connection before. Maybe that could be revisited. And finally, I have the favorites to sign Jadeveon Clowney. The team I believe will sign Jadeveon Clowney. That is the Philadelphia Eagles. They're trying to bolster the defense for Carson Wentz. They already added Darius Slay. Get a pass rusher, either in Yannick Ngakoue or Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney's better than Ngakoue in my opinion, even though he doesn't have as many sacks recently. Again, Clowney, big, fast, strong. You need good run defense in that division when you have guys like Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Adrian Peterson also with the Redskins. Three really good high elite running backs. I don't know if you consider AP elite anymore, but he's certainly up there. Zeke is definitely elite. And so is Saquon. So there's two top 5, maybe even two top 3 running backs in your division. You need run defense. Jadeveon Clowney is your man for that. I expect him to be a Philadelphia Eagle when training camp starts. So to recap real quick, Antonio Brown's probably going to the Seahawks in my opinion. Jadeveon Clowney is either going to go to Philly or, I forgot to mention them, I think he could also go back to the Seahawks as well. It seems that bridge isn't burned. I think he has an offer on the table from them. He obviously played with the Seahawks last year and was really good for them. Seahawks totally want him back, probably at the right price. If Seattle could add Antonio Brown and Clowney, they're right back in there at Super Bowl contenders, and you could seriously consider picking them for that division over San Francisco. Wouldn't surprise me at all. That is going to wrap it up for this segment. On the other side of the break, I'm going to be talking about some rookie quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love. Where do I see their careers going rookie year and beyond? How do I think their careers will play out? I'll be getting into that right after this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for listening so far. We're going to be sticking with the topic of the NFL, and I want to address the aspect of the NFL I haven't talked about yet on this show, and that's my opinion on the rookie quarterbacks coming into the league this year. Now, the draft was obviously a long time ago, back in April, but now that training camp is starting, I want to give some predictions and really just talk about the rookie quarterbacks and give my opinions on them, as I never have. So let's start off, let's get right into it. Let's just start off with Joe Burrow, number one overall pick of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, obviously, Joe Burrow was not supposed to be the number one overall pick at the beginning of the college football season. He was supposed to be really a nobody, maybe a fourth or fifth, even a sixth round pick. Number one was supposed to be Tua Tagovailoa, who I love as well. Joe Burrow obviously had maybe the greatest college football season ever, in my opinion. He threw for, I think, 60 touchdowns, maybe even 63 touchdowns, something crazy like that. Now, Joe Burrow is an interesting prospect, not only because of his story, but not a lot of time. It's a new trend in the NFL, right? So this isn't anything new. Like Joe Burrow, obviously his statistics are something new. Yeah, he threw 60 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, had a completion percentage of 76.3. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. Again, 60 touchdowns, 6 interceptions is one of the craziest things we've ever seen from a college football prospect ever. To make the jump from 16 touchdowns and 5 interceptions to 60 touchdowns and 6 interceptions is absolutely crazy stuff from Joe Burrow. You know, the only question I have with Joe Burrow is how much was it him? Was it all Joe Burrow? Was it some Joe Brady? Was it some, LSU team stuff, things like that? I think it's mostly Joe Burrow, to be honest with you. So Joe Burrow actually worked out with Jordan Palmer, who's Carson Palmer's, I think, little brother, who runs one of the best quarterback camps called QB Summit in the entire country. He works with guys like Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, I think Jarrett Stidham as well, Kyle Allen, guys like that who have had success in the NFL. And he's relatively new, and he started working with Joe Burrow for about the past year. And Joe Burrow made this huge jump. So I actually credit some of it to Jordan Palmer. I credit to some of it's Joe Brady's offensive scheme, some of it being LSU's talent. But I think a majority of it is just Joe Burrow, his work ethic, and he got better, and all of a sudden the game slowed down for him, and it clicked. Now, my only problem with Joe Burrow is, will that translate to the NFL? Which Joe Burrow are we getting? Is this the new Joe Burrow? Is he a one-year wonder? Is this all we're going to see of Joe Burrow at his top? Or is he going to translate like this to the NFL? I don't know if he'll translate to 60 touchdowns and 6 interceptions to the NFL, but I do think Joe Burrow is going to be a successful NFL quarterback, 100%. I think he's talented. I think his biggest asset is, besides his mentality, his work ethic, his killer instinct, is honestly his football IQ. I think he has one of the smartest minds in the entire game of college football, now going into the NFL. I saw a crazy stat of Joe Burrow that his actual passer rating went up when players were in his face, when there was a pass rush, when there were guys chasing him, things like that. And that's a big thing. That's one of those stats that is unexplainable. And I think all the great quarterbacks in the NFL have something that's unexplainable about them. Like, for example, Patrick Mahomes, how does he throw at those arm angles? How does he always give his team a chance to win? Things like that. Aaron Rodgers, how does he not throw interceptions? How does he never turn the ball over? Russell Wilson, how does he never get hit? Things like that. Tom Brady, how does he consistently just find ways to win games? How does he always come back in the fourth quarter? Peyton Manning had that quality too with the football IQ. And I think one of the things of Joe Burrow is just how does he always know where to put the ball? How is he always knowing exactly where the wide open guy is, no matter where the play is, no matter how late it is in the game? How does he consistently find the open guy? And that's one of the things about Joe Burrow, not to mention his obviously huge statistical jump as well. Now, in regards to Joe Burrow's career, it's going to be really interesting to see because I don't know what Joe Burrow necessarily is, and I know that's kind of confusing because we saw what he was at LSU, and again, one of my problems with Joe Burrow is that we already know what Joe Burrow is at his absolute best. You have seen Joe Burrow's ceiling, and Joe Burrow's ceiling is obviously, astronomical, best ever college football quarterback, which is great, but that's what you're shooting for. That's what you want Joe Burrow to be, and there's no guarantee that Joe Burrow will be that. Now, if Joe Burrow went to a team with better structure, a better history of developing quarterbacks and giving them the best chance, the best weapons, a team in a less hard division, a team with a more established head coach, things like that, I would be way more confident to say that Joe Burrow is absolutely going to pan out and be a Pro Bowler, maybe even be a Hall of Famer, be an All-Pro, be an all-time great, like Joe Burrow's being hyped up to be. But the problem is that he was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, and no shade towards the Bengals. I think that was the right pick, and again, I like what the Bengals did in the draft. I love their draft. I love T. Higgins matching up with Joe Burrow. I love a lot of their players. I love Joe Mixon. I love A.J. Green if he's going to stay. Boyd as well. They lost Eifert. I think they could maybe trade for David Njoku, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. And I really do believe they're on the rise. And it's not even just the Bengals' fault, but just the track record of how they've handled their quarterbacks has not been great. Now, the only quarterback they've given real resources around was Andy Dalton. And yes, he went to the playoffs, didn't really win a playoff game, but they did get to the playoffs. But then you go back to Carson Palmer, who was a super talented quarterback, had all the tools, made all the throws, similar to Joe Burrow, and then all of a sudden they couldn't get pieces around him, and he was not great, and obviously, as soon as he got the chance to leave, went to Arizona, and also, I think, Oakland as well, and was super successful in those places. And that's a big deal. I think the structure of the organization matters. Where you land matters. I don't know if Zach Taylor can coach. What I do know is that the Bengals underperformed from last season. They were not supposed to be the worst team in the league. The Dolphins were. And if you take, the Bengals coaching staff to the Dolphins coaching staff, who would you rather have? I would take the Dolphins because they overperformed. The Dolphins were supposed to win 0 games. They won 5. The Bengals were supposed to win 5 or 6 games, and I think they only won 2 or 3. And things like that matter. Who you have as a coach matters. I don't know if he can coach at all, if Zach Taylor can coach. I understand that he comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree, and Sean McVay looked great almost a year and a half ago, but now after missing the playoffs and the Rams, kind of on the decline, is that who you want your coaching tree based off of? Or is that where you want to get your head coach from? It's not like Andy Reid or Bill Belichick, other things like that. And again, another huge aspect of Joe Burrow's career is the division he's going to play in. Every single year for the rest of his career, as long as he's with the Bengals, he's going to have to play Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's not going anywhere. He's super young. He's super good. Just won the MVP. So you just got drafted in the division with the MVP of the league and arguably, I think, the most talented roster in the entire league, the Baltimore Ravens, one of the best head coaches in the league, John Harbaugh, one of the best running backs in the league, Mark Ingram, one of the best defenses, and that's the best team in your division. You have to play them twice a year. Then there's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think are, went 8-8 last year with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph as their quarterback. What do you think they're going to do with Ben Roethlisberger? If Ben Roethlisberger proves me wrong and comes back and is 100% and looks like the Ben Roethlisberger of old, they could go, 11-5. And that's a really good team as well. And then you have the Cleveland Browns in that division, who are one of the most talented rosters in the entire league. Might be signing a guy like Jadeveon Clowney. Again, have 2 good running backs. We'll only have 1 good tight end now, 2 good backs, 2 good receivers, 2 good tackles, 2 good defensive ends, 2 good corners, 2 good safeties. Everywhere across the board, the Cleveland Browns are talented, and if Kevin Stefanski can coach like I think he can, they're going to be a playoff team. So you, Joe Burrow, has walked into a division with 3 extremely talented players, 3 of probably the top 7 or maybe even top 10, maybe even top 7 defenses in the entire league. Each of those teams have an insane defensive front. One of them has Myles Garrett, one of them has TJ Watt, and the other has Matt Judon and Calais Campbell. And you are walking into that division with one of the worst offensive lines in the league, one of the maybe worst coaches in the entire league, a not great defense. And Joe Burrow was kind of just told, work with it. This isn't LSU. He's not having all those LSU weapons, the LSU offensive line. going against college football players anymore. He's going again against 3 of probably the top 5 or 6 defensive fronts in the league, defensive line-wise, in the entire league. Browns are stacked on the D-line. Steelers and the Ravens are stacked there as well. Those are the guys going after Joe Burrow, which is what gives me fear for Joe Burrow, that he might not pan out, that it might not work out just because of where he landed. If he went to a team like the Chargers, I would have had a lot more faith. But unfortunately, he got drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's not like he didn't want that. Obviously, he's from Ohio, and again, that's exactly who the Bengals could have picked, because Joe Burrow could maybe overcome that. Again, this brings me back to everything that I've ever said about quarterbacks, about the tier list. Do you elevate your team? I think Joe Burrow does elevate a team. I think he does elevate, LSU and things like that. So I do believe that the Bengals will get better with Joe Burrow, and he will make guys work, and he will make guys who were maybe underperforming before maybe overperform, and he'll make guys improve like John Ross, guys like that. I don't think he's like Dak Prescott, where he doesn't improve the guys around him. He's just a distributor of the ball, and a good one at that. I think he'll elevate. But in that division, I don't know if he can elevate to a level of where the Ravens are at, where the Steelers have been at for the past 15 years, where the Browns could be if they get the coach right and if Baker Mayfield steps up. I'm not sure that Joe Burrow can absolutely do that and can absolutely elevate to that level. I don't know if anybody can elevate the Bengals to that level besides maybe a Patrick Mahomes. Things like that matter for Joe Burrow, so I'm a little bit skeptical about him. Again, I do think he's going to work at some level. I just don't know if Joe Burrow is going to be this all-time great, multiple Super Bowl champion, Joe Montana comparison that people have been getting, Tom Brady comparison. I don't think he's going to be that at all. I think he'll be a good quarterback for the Bengals, and I think any success that the Bengals had should be attributed, a lot of it, credited to him, and a lot of the failures won't go, he won't have to face the burden of that's the reason why the Bengals lost. I think he'll be doing his best. I think he'll be a bright spot on a poor organization and a poor team for the next couple of years. Hopefully they can get it right, and hopefully that division gets easier for Joe Burrow as well. Next up is Tua Tagovailoa, who I love, and I think he might be my favorite, besides maybe Joe Burrow, quarterback prospect in the draft. Absolutely incredible. Tua is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen in college football history as well. It's crazy how stacked those two are, Joe Burrow and Tua, and I definitely think there's a gap after those two, 100%, after Joe Burrow and after Tua. Tua Tagovailoa threw for over 23 touchdowns, 23 touchdowns last year. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. 57 touchdowns the year before that. Things like that absolutely matter. It's crazy to think about that. Yeah, so last year, right? Not 27 touchdowns. He threw 33 touchdowns last year in only 9 games. Ridiculous. 43 touchdowns in 15 games. His sophomore season has an 87 touchdowns for his career and 11 interceptions. So an 8-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio for his career as a collegiate quarterback. Ridiculous stuff. I saw a stat online where Tua Tagovailoa had a ridiculous thing that was like 1 out of every 8 passes he threw in college was a touchdown. Ridiculous stuff. Will never be, topped. Things like that. Him and Joe Burrow are kind of record setters, and it was really cool to see them come out in the same draft. Obviously, Tua's biggest concern is health, injury concerns. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's behind him. Those are definite concerns. And it's not even the hip for me that concerns me about Tua's injury, because I do think that was a freak injury. And if he can recover from that and get over that, something like that won't happen again. It's it's the wrist injury, the finger injury, and the ankle injuries, those little knick-knack injuries that keep you out 2-3 weeks. Could end a season, if it's late in the year, things like that matter. Could be the difference between you making and missing the playoffs. Someone who has those similar types of injuries is a guy like Carson Wentz, who, hurts his back, then hurts his shoulder, gets a concussion, rolls his ankle, and it's not like he misses the whole season. Carson Wentz missed the whole season only once when he tore his ACL, missed the rest of that season, things like that. But they have knick-knack injuries, which makes them injury-prone, and I do think injury-prone right now is the correct label for Tua. Can he correct it in the NFL? That's up to him and the Miami Dolphins, things like that. While Joe Burrow is going to start week 1, I don't think Tua is going to start week 1 for the Miami Dolphins. I do believe he's going to start a little bit later in the year. The earliest I could see Tua Tagovailoa starting for the Dolphins is that week 3 game against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. Easiest game on the schedule for the Dolphins. Wouldn't surprise me at all if that's where he would be going. But again, there have been reports that Tua has had this miraculous injury return, and he's not hurt anymore, and he's all ready to go. All systems are go, or the quote from the Miami Herald. Now, it's going to be interesting to see, because how long are the Dolphins going to sit and wait great if he's healthy now. If he's not healthy, you can definitely justify not playing him, things like that. Ryan Fitzpatrick is obviously a capable guy, one of the best veteran quarterbacks in the league when it comes to a leadership standpoint, a mentor standpoint for Tua. He'll be absolutely fantastic. He'll be great for, everything that Tua wants to do in teaching moments. And, Ryan Fitzpatrick also knows his role. He knows that he's not the future of the Dolphins. He knows that eventually he's going to hand it over to Tua and he'll be a great mentor and he's not a threat to Tua in any way, shape, or form. But again, he went 5-4 down the stretch as the Dolphin quarterback and brought all this excitement. So you almost feel like the Dolphins owe it to Ryan Fitzpatrick to just start him at least the first game or two. How long will that go? Who knows? Again, I look at that Week 3 game against the Jacksonville Jaguars as the earliest that Tua will start, and I also see a Week 13 game against the Cincinnati Bengals against Joe Burrow as the latest that Tua will start. So I think between Week 3 and Week 13, we'll see Tua Tagovailoa as the starting quarterback for the Dolphins. Now, I think that Tua might have landed in the best situation out of anybody from a coaching staff perspective. I really like Brian Flores. I think he might be the one Belichick disciple that actually might stick and actually might turn into a really good head coach, and I'm still skeptical about it just because of the way that Belichick disciples have handled it. But again, he seems to be copying a lot of what Bill Belichick has done, especially from a defensive standpoint. Again, versatility, guys like Kyle Van Noy, Jerome Baker. And then on the cornerback position, he's not afraid to pay for corners and upgrade at the secondary position because he believes that's maybe the most important position on the defensive end. Drafted Noah Iganagami in the first round. He's a big physical slot corner. Guy like Nick Needham really came on at the end of last year. And then obviously Xavier Howard, who gets paid big money, one of the best interception guys in the league. And Byron Jones was shutdown corner as well, one of the top 5 corners in the league as well. They have a fantastic secondary. Can their defensive line step up? Can the Dolphins edge rushers patch up? They don't have a true number 1 pass rusher. Linebacking core is a little bit unproven. Can Jerome Baker take that next step? Same with Raekwon McMillan. Will Kyle Van Noy stay in that Patriot type production that he had with New England, or will we go back to his Detroit Lion form? And when it comes on the offense, are these guys going to step up on offense for Tua Tagovailoa? Is Mike Gesicki, the tight end, going to take the next step? Is Devontae Parker, who was one of the best wide receivers in the entire league last year, going to stay like that, or was he a one-year wonder? Preston Williams, can he take the next step? Can Matt Breida be a true number 1 running back? All these question marks matter in Tua's career and Tua's development and how quickly the Dolphins could really turn this thing around. I really do believe that Tua is the quarterback for the Dolphins, and I really do believe he's going to be an outstanding QB. His accuracy, football IQ, his ball placement is second to none. But it is going to matter how these weapons turn out. I don't know if Tua can be like a Russell Wilson and work with nothing and make something out of it and get 9 wins consistently. I do think Tua needs at least some talent on the skill positions. I do think, like Joe Burrow, he elevates the team and will make guys better like Dak Prescott doesn't, in my opinion. But again, I don't think he can work with nothing like Russell Wilson does. I think he will need some sort of skill position on the wide receiver standpoint, on the tight end standpoint, consistently, and guys to take that next jump, and Devontae Parker to stay in that top 5 to really prove that he, will work out and will be to reach his full potential. Quickly, I want to get to Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. Again, Justin Herbert I think isn't going to start till the end of the year. I like the pick for the Chargers. I'm not all on the Justin Herbert hate wagon. I think he's going to work out really nice for them. Now, he's the guy that I don't think elevates players, though. I think he's more of a Dak Prescott, a Ryan Tannehill, a guy that can't really necessarily make wide receivers better and will need a lot of talent around him. Lucky for him, he got drafted by the Chargers, who are one of the most talented rosters in the league. Fantastic defense, great wide receiving core, great Austin Eckler running back. Only real weakness of the Los Angeles Chargers is the offensive line, but Herbert's a little bit more mobile, so that could work there. Anthony Lynn's a good head coach, in my opinion, likes a lot of mobile quarterbacks, had success with Tyrod Taylor, who I think will start the majority of this year. I think at the end of the year, they'll sort of pan off and give the keys on to Justin Herbert, who I think will probably start the last 5 games of the season. That's when I think we see Justin Herbert in a Charger uniform starting games. And finally, I want to get to Jordan Love, who I think will get on the field sooner rather than later. I've said this about Aaron Rodgers a ton of times. I really do believe that the Packers want to see Jordan Love sooner rather than later. I think Aaron Rodgers is on his way out sooner rather than later. He's closer to leaving the Packers than finishing his career there. I give it a year or 2 before Aaron moves on, goes to a team probably in California, and Jordan Love steps up and be the Packer quarterback. I think he'll work out, not to an Aaron Rodgers level, not to a Brett Favre level, but Matt LaFleur clearly likes him. He likes to take big plays, take big risks. More of a risk-taker quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. What I kind of see a play-style version of, what's kind of funny to me is I see a play-style version of Aaron Rodgers, but a mentality of Brett Favre, like that risk-taking mentality, gunslinger and Jordan Love, and also that throwing ability, kind of like slingshot arm that, Aaron Rodgers has, those mobile plays. They've kind of combined the two, and that's where Jordan Love comes out. I don't think he'll have the success of either, but I really do believe that Jordan Love will work out to some level with the Green Bay Packers. I think he's just talented enough, and I like Matt LaFleur as a head coach. We're going to take one final break. On the other side, to wrap up the show, I'm going to be giving you my top 10 most versatile players in the NBA, so don't go anywhere. Make sure you stick around for that, and we will be back right after this short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you the GSMC Podcast Network for one last segment in today's episode. For the next 5 or so minutes, I want to be giving you guys my top 10 most versatile players in the NBA. Bleacher Report came out with a list of who they believe are the most versatile players in the NBA, and got a lot of heat on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all over the social media world. So I'm going to be giving you guys my most versatile players in the NBA from both offensive and defensive point of view, kind of all combined. Who's the best passer, shooter, scorer, and defender. So all sort of things wrapped up there are my qualifications. And let's just get right into it. At number 10, I have Paul George, who's one of the best, defenders, two-way players in the entire NBA. One of the reasons why he's not necessarily higher on this list is I don't know if he can necessarily guard a 1 through 5. I don't know if he can necessarily guard those bigger guys. Also, maybe some of those faster point guards. Again, nonetheless, one of the best wing defenders in the entire league. Also a fantastic offensive player, one of the most versatile players in the entire NBA on both ends of the floor. Paul George at number 10. At number 9, I have Miami Heat center Bam Adebayo, who I think is one of the most versatile young players in the NBA. Maybe the most versatile center in the entire league, besides somebody I'll get into a little bit later on in this list. Bam Adebayo is also one of the best passing bigs in the league. I think he averaged about 5 assists. He can shot block, run the floor, get rebounds. Also super athletic, dunking, layup package, shoots the mid-range a little bit as well. And again, one of the best distributors of the ball as well. Sometimes if you watch Miami Heat games, we'll actually go through certain stretches of taking the ball up, playing a little bit of point guard, kind of some power center, or guard center sort of thing. And that's really awesome to see. Again, I mentioned this on the show before. I think Bam Adebayo is the perfect mold for the center position going forward. I think he's going to be an absolute superstar in this league. Definitely one of the most versatile players. Not to mention he's one of the best defenders in the league. He can guard 1 through 5. There's some clips of him guarding guys like Steph Curry, LeBron James. He almost shut down Giannis Antetokounmpo when he was playing against him, Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, guys like that. He's guarded all those guys before and done a fantastic job. One of the most versatile players in the league. Bam Adebayo coming in at number 9. At number 8, I have Ben Simmons because he reminds me a lot of Magic Johnson from a playstyle wise. He's a 6'10" point guard who can pass, facilitate, play lockdown defense, and is super athletic around the rim. Now, obviously, Ben Simmons' biggest thing is that he can't shoot a freaking 3 to save his life, and I get that, but that doesn't discredit him from being one of the most versatile players in the entire NBA. Ben Simmons on a fast break is absolutely unstoppable. Not a single person in this league can stop him. He can distribute, he can drive and kick, get to the rim, dunk it, lay up, play defense as well. He usually guards the best player on the other team. That's usually what Ben Simmons does for Philly. So I still think he's an absolute incredible player to watch. I think one of the reasons why he's not as successful is because of the partnership with Joel Embiid. I don't think they mesh. I don't think they fit. I think if Philly just surrounded Ben Simmons with shooters, he'd be absolutely incredible. And I think the drive and kick game would be ridiculous. And Ben Simmons, again, with a full head of steam all the way down the floor is absolutely unstoppable. Ben Simmons at number 8. At number 7, I have Miami Heat forward Jimmy Butler, forward/guard. Jimmy Butler's Mr. Everything for Miami. He plays defense, obviously, one of the best defenders in the league. Also can pass. Jimmy Butler had a career high in assists this season. Can shoot from anywhere. He's got to improve his three-point shot a little bit, but it's pretty good. Great in the mid-range game. Obviously great around the rim as well. Jimmy Butler, one of the most versatile players, has been in the NBA for a long time, coming in at number 7. At number 6, I have the best young player in the league, in my opinion. Luka Doncic almost averaged a triple-double this year as a 21-year-old. Absolutely ridiculous. Made the transition from shooting guard/small forward to point guard this year for the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, he averaged almost 10 assists, almost 10 rebounds as well. He's absolutely ridiculous. Mr. Everything. He's Superman for the Dallas Mavericks. He's going to be incredible to watch for a long, long time. He's going to be an all-time great. He's ridiculous. Can shoot the three, mid-range, around the rack. Athletic enough, can pass, obviously, those assist numbers are incredible. It's going to be so much fun to watch Luka Doncic's career when he actually hits his prime. Who knows what he'll be averaging. Maybe the new norm in the NBA will be averaging like 45 points a game or something ridiculous like that. So Luka Doncic comes in at number 6. At number 5, we have maybe the most athletic player in the entire NBA, and that's Russell Westbrook. And I know he gets a lot of heat for his three-point shooting ability, but you can't deny that the guy is versatile. He's a point guard, but he almost plays like a freaking center the way he's so big, so physical, so tough, puts his shoulder down, almost plays like a running back on the court. Layups, dunks, energy, hype. Everything about Russell Westbrook is awesome. Everything about Russell Westbrook is all energy, all hype, a lot of fun to watch. And I get it. He doesn't have maybe that championship, those playoff wins, or, that three-point shooting ability, but he's totally a versatile player in the NBA. I think he's a great defender as well. Russell Westbrook coming in at number 5. At number 4, we have Kawhi Leonard, who's maybe the best two-way player in the entire NBA, maybe the best wing defender in the league, as well as one of the best offensive megastars in the league as well. Obviously leading the Los Angeles Clippers to a potential championship this year. Kawhi kind of speaks for himself. He's versatile, can guard anybody, can also shoot on anybody. One of the best and most versatile players in the league, Kawhi Leonard. At number 4. At number 3, I have maybe the most versatile center in the entire league. That's Jokic. He is the best passing big, one of the best shooting bigs in the entire league as well. And he also recently just lost a ton of weight, so it's going to be really interesting to see how athletic Jokic truly is. Maybe he's going to be doing some dunks now instead of just those layups. Jokic is absolutely fun to watch. He plays so big and clunky and almost sloppy, but all of a sudden it's also like art as well. It's kind of a crazy yin and yang thing with Nikola Jokic. A ton of fun to watch. One of the most versatile players in the NBA, best passing big, and really the future of the center position from an offensive standpoint. Nikola Jokic coming in at number 3 of most versatile players in the league. Number 2, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who obviously can do whatever the hell the Milwaukee Bucks want. Pass, working on his shooting. Obviously, around the rim, he's unstoppable. In the paint, he's unstoppable. Is also one of the best defenders in the league as well. And he can really, truly guard 1 through 5. He can guard a point guard, a shooting guard. He's big enough to guard a center, like a Joel Embiid, something like that. So I have Giannis Antetokounmpo at number 2 of most versatile players in the league. And number 1, I have the most versatile player of all time, and that's LeBron James. He has reinvented himself yet again. He is now a point guard after starting his career as a small forward and playing with the Heat almost as a small forward/power forward, with his back to the basket a lot, and also, passing as well. Whatever LeBron James decides to be, he will be the best at. Whatever he wants to position, he wants to play, whatever role he's bearing, or role he's carrying on, or burden he's doing from the offense for whatever team he's playing for, whatever game, he can do whatever he wants. He can reinvent himself, not from just year to year, but from game to game as well. He's also reshaped his body. He's one of the best defenders in the league, or at least was. I think he can in moments when he really wants to and wants to step it up, which is what he'll do in the playoffs this season. LeBron James is the most versatile player of all time and the most versatile player in the NBA today. That is going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on all those social media platforms. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.